A salaryman just wanted to have fun playing a game, but unexpectedly became the strongest player and beat every bully in the entire game. A 38-year-old office worker named Taiit Tanaka, a passionate gamer who spends much of his free time playing video games. One day he discovers a virtual reality game known as One More Free Life Online, and immediately decides to give it a try. After entering the character creation screen, he creates an avatar named Eard, the character who will lead the events of the story. Since Taiit has a full-time office job, he knows his gaming time will be limited to only 2 hours each day. Because of this restriction, he plans to build a character that can progress without depending on other players. To avoid attracting attention, he deliberately selects several of the weakest skills available. He also chooses the Archer class, a role famous for frequently missing attacks. Combined with his poor skill choices, he believes this setup will allow him to remain unnoticed while other players compete to become stronger and more famous. Once his preparations are complete, Eard explains that One More Free Life Online differs greatly from ordinary games. Rather than forcing players through a fixed storyline, the game allows complete freedom. Players can travel wherever they want, pursue different professions, or spend their time mastering activities such as blacksmithing and crafting. As Eard explores the city, he notices that the launch day has attracted a massive number of players. A girl who realizes he is a newcomer is about to speak with him when a golden armored knight suddenly crashes into him. The knight, whose name is Wart, immediately mocks Eard for choosing one of the weakest character builds possible. After ridiculing him in front of everyone, Wart and his companions quickly walk away. Instead of feeling discouraged, Eard considers himself fortunate. In his opinion, it would have been far worse if he had encountered someone as powerful as Wart in a more dangerous situation. Soon afterward, he makes his way to a training ground to improve his ability. Initially, he struggles to hit anything with his bow. However, after firing over 100 arrows, he reaches level 5 and also gains experience in several other skills, including kicking. After spending many hours training, Eard finally decides that he is prepared to begin hunting monsters. Unfortunately, once he reaches the hunting zones, he discovers long lines of players waiting for their chance to fight. Rather than waste time competing for monsters, he changes his plan and begins gathering herbs instead. While collecting plants, Eard quickly realizes that his analyze skill is too weak to identify even the most basic herbs. Over the following days, he continues practicing and eventually raises his medicine skill enough to recognize simple ingredients. During this process, he discovers a dangerous herb capable of killing anyone who consumes it, leaving him surprised by how realistic and unforgiving the game can be. Eard later reveals that he never spent his starting funds on weapons or armor. Instead, he invested all of it into materials for potion making. However, he soon learns that many NPC merchants already sell potions. If he wants players to buy his products, he must create items of much higher quality. Realizing this, he decides that hunting monsters is the best way to gather better resources. When he arrives at a hunting area, he notices that most adventurers have already moved elsewhere. Seeing an opportunity, he begins searching for prey. Before long, a horned rabbit appears. Eard fires an arrow at it, but the shot misses completely. The angry creature immediately charges toward him. Thinking quickly, he shoots its leg to slow it down before finishing it with a series of kicks. After the battle, the horned rabbit leaves behind fur and meat as loot. Looking at the results, Eard cannot help but feel that his kicking abilities are currently far more reliable than his archery. Not long afterward, two adventurers named Sway and Millie arrive at the scene. Sway bursts into laughter because he has never heard a horned rabbit make such a strange noise while dying. As the man continues laughing, Eard starts wondering whether he is some sort of entertainer. Eventually, Sway explains that he simply finds Eard interesting. After exchanging introductions, both Sway and Millie ask if they can add him to their friend list. Eard agrees to the request and the pair soon leave. Once they are gone, he reflects on the battle and concludes that his strength is still lacking since defeating a basic monster required far too much effort. Determined to improve, he targets another creature and experiments with wind magic. The spell proves effective, but Eard still wants a safer way to avoid being noticed. Remembering that he possesses a stealth skill, he decides to test it during his next encounter. The results exceed his expectation, allowing him to approach a third monster without being detected. As the evening grows late, Eard logs out of the game and prepares for another day of work. The following day, he returns to the world of One More Free Life Online. After tasting some bread sold in town, he discovers that it is disappointingly bland. Wanting something better, he purchases several seasonings and uses the rabbit meat he collected earlier to prepare a meal. After repeatedly experimenting with rabbit steak recipes, Eard finally succeeds in creating something extraordinary. The aroma spreads throughout the city and quickly captures everyone's attention. Before he knows it, a large crowd has gathered behind him, hoping to get a taste. Although nervous, Eard decides to turn the situation into a business opportunity. He announces that each steak will cost 100 glow, a price 20 times higher than ordinary NPC bread. Rather than discouraging customers, the expensive price only increases their interest. Demand becomes so high that Eard spends hours cooking dozens of steaks. During the process, he even unlocks a new ability called fast cooking. As time passes, Eard begins working on crafting his own bow. Since very few players choose the archer class, not many people bother learning this skill. Despite several failed attempts, he eventually succeeds in producing an improved bow frame. Later, Eard visits the marketplace in search of stronger armor. After selecting a suitable set, he feels satisfied with the purchase. While checking his status, he notices that his attributes have improved significantly, but he quickly remembers that he still has food to prepare. Before leaving town, he stocks several of his crafted items inside a vending machine for sale. Once that is done, he heads back into the wilderness and begins hunting again. This time, he successfully defeats several wolves, creatures that are considerably stronger than horned rabbits. Following his successful hunt, Eard collected a huge quantity of monster materials that could be used for both potion making and cooking. Looking at everything he had gathered, he felt extremely satisfied and considered the day a major success. When he later returned to check his vending machines, he was surprised to find that every single item had already been purchased. Some buyers had even left positive comments praising the excellent quality of his products. Not long after, Eard noticed an unusual commotion in town. A large number of players seemed to be desperately searching for potion. Confused by the situation, he contacted Sway to find out what was happening. That was when he learned that the town's NPC merchants were beginning to run out of potion supplies. As soon as the surrounding adventurers realized that Eard was the one producing potion, they immediately crowded around him and began requesting to buy some. Seeing no other option, Eard informed them that he had enough stock to sell, but each customer would only be allowed to purchase 5 potions. The announcement was met with excitement from the crowd. A little later, Sway and the others arrived and volunteered to assist him with the sales. Together, they handled the growing number of customers. Unfortunately, Eard eventually ran out of one of the key herbs required for brewing additional potion. He explained that very few players had chosen to study medicine because most people viewed the profession as worthless. With his ingredients exhausted, Eard informed everyone that he would continue production once he gathered more materials the following day. At that exact moment, Wart and his companions appeared. Wart immediately demanded that Eard surrender every potion he had left. Eard firmly rejected the demand and pointed toward the large gathering of adventurers nearby who clearly had no intention of letting that happen. He also reminded Wart that if potion supplies disappeared entirely, turning the player base against himself would be a terrible decision. The response only fueled Wart's anger. Without hesitation, he challenged Eard to a duel. Sway attempted to stop Eard from accepting, but Eard remained completely calm. He declared that it was time to teach Wart a lesson about respect. The moment he accepted the challenge, both players were transported into a separate battle arena created specifically for duels. Even before the fight started, Eard noticed that Wart was acting as though victory was already guaranteed. Believing that overconfidence was his opponent's greatest weakness, Eard waited for the match to begin. As soon as Wart launched his attack, Eard effortlessly avoided it and, after only a brief exchange, defeated him with surprising ease. Wart's teammates quickly carried him away from the arena, while the surrounding spectators stood in shock after witnessing Eard's performance. Before departing, Eard reassured everyone that fresh potion supplies would be available for purchase. The next day, once everything was settled, he logged out of the game. Thinking back on the duel, Eard felt certain that other players would now treat him very differently. Several days passed and Eard noticed a major change within the game. The medicine profession had suddenly become much more popular because players had finally realized that NPC merchants were not an unlimited source of important items. After logging back in, Eard met with Sway and the rest of his companions. He thanked Sway for inviting him into their clan, a group known as Blue Color. Sway then introduced the remaining members. Nora specialized in fighting with short swords. Ray filled the role of tank and focused on protecting the party. The last member was Casamine, who wielded a bastard sword in battle. When Eard attempted to introduce himself, he quickly discovered that it was unnecessary. Thanks to his victory against Wart, his name had already become well known among many players. As Sway explained everyone's specialties, Eard quietly observed the team's setup and felt that their overall balance was not ideal. Despite that concern, the group trusted him enough to invite him on a dangerous hunt targeting a wild bear. The invitation immediately made Eard nervous because he understood how powerful such monsters could be. However, the others assured him that they fully believed in his ability. Not long afterward, the party entered the forest in search of their target. By combining his vision and tracking skills, Eard successfully located one of the bears roaming through the area. Without wasting any time, he fired an arrow at the creature. The attack enraged the beast, causing it to charge directly toward him. Before it could reach him, Ray stepped in front of the party and activated Taunt, forcing the bear to focus entirely on him. As Ray endured the monster's attacks, Millie continuously restored his health. Unfortunately, the group soon realized that their weapons were struggling to pierce the bear's thick hide. Their swords and daggers barely inflicted any damage. Even Millie's fire spells proved ineffective against the creature. As the battle dragged on, panic began spreading through the group because their reserves of magic power were rapidly decreasing. Drawing upon nearly 4 decades of gaming experience, Eard searched for a weakness that could turn the battle around. He first attempted to end the fight by firing an arrow straight into the bear's head. Although the attack landed successfully, it still failed to bring the monster down. Realizing that ordinary methods would not be enough, Eard decided to reveal his trump card. Using wind magic to dramatically increase his speed, he launched himself forward and drove the arrow much deeper into the creature's skull. Moments later, Millie delivered the finishing blow with her magic, finally bringing the bear down. The entire party celebrated their hard-earned victory. Wanting to reward everyone for their efforts, Eard announced that he would personally prepare a meal for the group. A short time later, he served freshly cooked meat skewers that immediately impressed everyone. After tasting them, Nora asked if he had acquired some rare recipe capable of producing food that delicious. Eard explained that recipes could not be traded between players because the game prohibited such transaction. He further clarified that recipes were often incredibly valuable, even when 2 players followed the exact same instructions and used identical ingredients. The final flavor could still be completely different depending on the person preparing the meal. After hearing the explanation, the group finally understood how the cooking system worked. Taking everything into consideration, they happily told Eard that they were fortunate to have him on their team since he could provide incredible meals without forcing them to spend a fortune. The group's excitement continued to grow, and before long, the remaining members decided to send friend requests to Eard as well. A few days later, Eard found himself facing his first major setback. While exploring a forest that was far more dangerous than any area he had visited before, he encountered a giant wasp. He attempted to attack it, but his shot accidentally struck a rock ant instead. That mistake immediately turned the situation into a disaster. More rock ants began appearing from every direction. Eard tried to fight back by kicking one of them, but the attack triggered a paralysis effect. Unable to move properly, he was quickly surrounded and overwhelmed by the swarm. After his defeat, Eard respawned in the city. At the same time, every player in the game received a system notification announcing a brand new update known as the Fairy Dance. The update introduced a variety of new features, including additional skills, items, and mechanics designed to help players progress. Most importantly, fairies had now appeared throughout the world and would accompany players during their adventure. Remembering how badly his recent battle had gone, Eard decided he could no longer afford to be careless. Since dying carried penalties, he knew he had to become much stronger. To remove the effects of his current penalty, he focused on improving his blacksmith profession. He spent the entire day working on a special type of arrow specifically designed to penetrate the tough shells of rock ants. Once the arrows were complete, Eard realized that his kicks also needed improvement. After spending a long time thinking about possible solutions, he designed a unique combat soul. The new equipment featured sharp spikes underneath and blades attached to both sides, making it far more effective in battle. The blacksmith Black happened to witness the creation and was just as shocked as the surrounding adventurers. Even Eard was impressed by his own invention, because the idea had never crossed his mind before. Not long after, he met a merchant named Mew, who provided him with a special bowstring. With the material in hand, Eard headed to a workshop and began creating a new bow that would be stronger and better suited to his combat style. As he worked, he carefully analyzed different bow designs and considered which one would perform most effectively. After investing additional experience points into his archery abilities, he concluded that a house bow would be the ideal choice. During the crafting process, Black arrived once again and was surprised to see Eard creating yet another weapon. Eventually, the project was completed. Unlike ordinary bows, this weapon possessed a unique appearance. Eard proudly named it the X-shaped housebow. Looking over the finished product, he felt completely satisfied because it greatly surpassed his previous weapon in terms of power. The following day, Eard returned to the forest with one goal in mind: revenge against the rock ant. After finding one of the creatures, he tested his newly crafted bow. The results exceeded his expectations as the monster was defeated in a single shot. Satisfied with the performance, Eard spent the remainder of the day hunting rock ants. By the time he finished, he had gathered an entire sack filled with their shells. He planned to deliver the materials to Monyon so they could be turned into armor. Several days passed, and the highly anticipated fairy update finally began. As soon as Eard logged in, a packed crystal suddenly appeared before him. Without hesitation, he attempted to establish a contract and obtain his own fairy companion. However, before the process could be completed, the crystal unexpectedly shattered into pieces. The outcome left Eard deeply disappointed. Later, he met up with his friends and quickly noticed that every one of them had successfully obtained a fairy. Each fairy possessed a different appearance, many resembling animals or magical beasts. His companions encouraged him not to lose hope. They explained that the fairy dance event would continue into a second phase. Since his packed crystal had not completely vanished, they believed there was still a chance for him to receive a fairy in the future. Even so, Sway pointed out something unusual. For some mysterious reason, every fairy seemed to be incredibly fond of Eard. It almost looked as though they viewed him as someone special. The group immediately began teasing him and jokingly gave him the nickname Fairy Charmer. Unfortunately, the title only left Eard more confused than ever. Several hours later, while relaxing by himself, a fairy unexpectedly approached him. This encounter made him realize that the fairies genuinely appeared to enjoy being around him. Curious about the changes occurring around him, Eard checked his status window and discovered that many of his skills had increased in level. Wanting to take advantage of his progress, he decided to learn and test several new abilities. To do so, he traveled to a nearby dungeon. The moment he entered, his detection skills activated and revealed numerous traps hidden throughout the area. After advancing deeper into the dungeon, he soon encountered an arachnid-type monster. Eard immediately launched an attack, but he quickly noticed that his damage output was lower than expected. The spider counterattacked, yet Eard avoided the strike by utilizing his newly acquired great jumps. After restraining the monster with a whip, he followed up with a devastating kick that finally defeated it. Not long afterward, several mysterious fairy-like figures made of purple light appeared before him. The glowing beings seemed to be guiding him somewhere, so Eard chose to follow them. Eventually, they led him to a treasure chest hidden within the dungeon. Without wasting a second, he opened it and found a ring waiting inside. Eard was thrilled by the discovery and believed the fairies were responsible for leading the treasure. Just then, another system message related to the fairy dance event appeared before him. According to the announcement, the second phase of the update was finally ready. The next stage of the event had officially begun, and it would be known as the Fairy Tournament. The following day, Eard was spending time in the city when a system announcement informed all players that the second stage of the Fairy Dance event had officially begun. According to the update, fairies would now be capable of evolving through battles against other players. The system also revealed that the top performers would earn the opportunity to participate in a special tournament event. Alongside this feature, a new title system was introduced. Fairy owners would be able to earn unique titles based on their actions and achievement. Another important detail concerned players who had failed to obtain a fairy. The system explained that damaged packed crystals could now be repaired through player versus player combat. Once restored, the crystal would guarantee a successful contract with a fairy. The update also disclosed that fairies had become far more advanced. They now possessed individual consciousness and could react differently depending on their surroundings and experience. The announcement filled the player base with excitement. Eard, however, was less optimistic. He could not help wondering whether the event would truly run smoothly since many players lacked experience when it came to fighting other people. Sometime later, Eard met up with Black. During their conversation, Black explained that craftsmen had collectively agreed not to participate in the upcoming battles. Any player foolish enough to challenge a craftsman would have to deal with the entire craftsman's guild. The arrangement had already been approved by all members. Afterward, Black changed the subject and asked whether Eard had visited Nexia, the newly discovered city. Eard admitted that he had not been there yet, though the idea immediately caught his interest. Black explained that Nexia had become the gathering place for players eager to compete in battles, while those seeking a more peaceful environment generally remained in Fis. Hearing this made Eard smile. The fact that players naturally created their own communities and culture was one of the things he enjoyed most about online games. Curious, he asked Black whether he intended to participate in the event himself. Black simply laughed and replied that he was far happier spending his time at the forge than on the battlefield. Several days later, Eard finally returned to the game after being unable to log in for nearly an entire week. The moment he appeared, however, he noticed people constantly staring at him. Confused, Eard opened his status screen and immediately discovered the reason. He had been awarded the title Fairy Charmer. Rather than feeling proud, Eard was horrified. He was convinced that anyone who saw the title would assume he was some kind of fairy fanatic. Determined to replace it with something less embarrassing, he began asking nearby players whether anyone wanted to challenge him to a duel. A girl named Rona quickly accepted the offer. Eard became interested when she revealed that she was a member of the Blue Color Clan. Rona explained that she practiced martial arts and had always wanted to meet him because his combat style relied heavily on kicks. As preparations for the duel began, something unexpected happened. Rona's fairy suddenly flew over and landed directly on Eard's shoulders. To everyone's surprise, the fairy then refused to participate in the battle. The spectators could only stare in disbelief as the effects of the Fairy Charmer title revealed themselves once again. Later, Eard explained that he had repeatedly attempted to find opponents, but every time a duel was about to begin, the fairies involved refused to cooperate. Several hours afterward, Rona contacted him with a strange request. Her pet bird had completely stopped eating, and she wanted Eard's help. The situation did not surprise him at all. At that point, enormous crowds of players were already lining up to purchase food for their fairies. Earlier that same day, another player had approached him after their fairy refused to eat anything. Trusting Eard's reputation as a cook, they had asked him to prepare something special. Eard had simply made a few fried snacks that he believed the fairy might enjoy. Unfortunately, word of that success had spread across the entire server. The attention annoyed Eard greatly. In reality, he was already 38 years old and only wanted to enjoy the game in peace. A few hours later, he finally met Rona and delivered the food she had requested. Eard apologized for keeping her waiting, explaining that he had spent the entire day dealing with players who wanted food for their fairies. Rona completely understood the situation and suggested that they visit Nexia together. Finding the idea interesting, Eard agreed without hesitation. The two immediately teleported to the city. After arriving, they noticed a duel taking place between two adventurers. Curious about the match, they moved closer to watch. One of the fighters commanded his fairy to assist him in combat and launched an attack. Moments later, both combatants clashed with their swords. During the battle, one player ordered his wolf companion to attack. The wolf ignored the command entirely. The opposing adventurer instantly took advantage of the opening. A lightning attack struck its target, and a follow-up sword thrust ended the duel. Rona quickly understood the situation, because fairies were normally extremely loyal and would never disobey their owners without a reason. Eard explained that the defeated player had earned the reputation of being a fairy abuser, a label given to individuals who mistreated their fairy companion. At that moment, the frustrated player raised his hand as if he intended to strike the wolf. The scene reminded Eard of a similar incident he had witnessed before. In that previous case, a player had treated a fairy badly and received a severe punishment from the game. The system had forced him into a battle against his own fairy. If the owner lost, they would lose the right to possess their packed crystal. The wolf's owner clearly remembered that possibility as well. Realizing the consequences, he lowered his hand and abandoned the idea. Without another word, he turned around and walked away. After the duel ended, Eard and Rona continued talking for quite some time. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with him. Feeling tired after the long day, Eard said goodbye to Rona before logging out of the game. After logging out, Eard reflected on how there were still good people like Rona who genuinely cared about their fairies. Because of that, he had not completely lost faith in humanity. The next day, the player who had fought alongside the wolf came to speak with him. The young man explained that he had seen the video where the wolf's owner mistreated his fairy. He did not want to end up treating his own wolf the same way, so he asked Eard for advice on how to make peace with his companion. He explained that when he first got his fairy, he had no idea how to take care of it. Because of that, he watched various videos for guidance, but many of them treated fairies like circus animals. After the update gave fairies consciousness, he had struck his wolf a few times and now deeply regretted it. Eard understood the situation and simply advised him to treat the wolf as a friend. They should rest together, eat together, and spend time together whenever possible. Wanting to help, Eard prepared some winged meat for the wolf. The adventurer carefully extended his hand toward the animal. The wolf stared at the food for a few moments before finally accepting it, which made the young adventurer extremely happy. After thanking Eird, the player said goodbye and left. At that moment, an old man named Silver arrived and asked Eird if they could talk somewhere more private. They moved to a cabin, where Eird immediately noticed that the man was extremely well equipped. Because of that, he assumed Silver was one of the strongest players in the game. Silver then asked whether Eird knew a player named Glad. When Eird admitted that he did not, Silver warned him to be very careful because Glad had been targeting players who possessed the Fairy Charmer title. Silver explained that Glad had once been a member of his group and had been an incredibly talented tank. However, Glad's behavior had become problematic, and because of that, the group eventually expelled him. Silver also revealed that Glad was extremely prideful. When the fairy event began, he was the only member of the group who failed to form a contract with the fairy. Eird could not help but notice that the situation sounded similar to his own. Silver continued explaining that Glad had begun bothering everyone because he was the only one without a fairy, leaving the group with no choice but to remove him. At that moment, a Valkyrie made of light appeared beside Silver. It was his fairy. Silver further explained that after receiving a second chance, Glad eventually formed a contract with a Dark Fox fairy. Since then, Glad had been constantly challenging players to battles. Finally, Silver warned Eird to stay alert. He added that he personally intended to settle things during the tournament because he knew Glad would try to prove his strength there. After saying that, Silver left together with his fairy. The following day, Eird fought a bear and tested his new clone skill. The clones fired several arrows into the monster. Afterward, Eird finished the creature with a powerful kick. He felt that he still needed more practice fighting alone, but after increasing the level of one of his skills, he became very satisfied with his progress. A short time later, Eird headed to one of Nexia's caves in search of minerals for a new weapon. However, he accidentally struck an explosive material and barely escaped disaster. Several nearby players warned him that if the material had exploded, it might have destroyed a large portion of the city. Hours later, Eird visited Black and told him that he intended to create new weapons. Over the course of several hours, he crafted a spiral-shaped arrowhead as well as a metallic whip. The following day, he showed the creations to Black. Black congratulated, explaining that such items could not have been easy to make. After a long conversation, Eird eventually said goodbye and left. He then traveled to the alchemy shop and took out the explosive material he had collected. Since the shop was specially designed for handling dangerous materials, he knew that even if something exploded, nobody would be harmed. After several hours of experimentation, Eird successfully created 3 potions. He then traveled far away from the city to test them. After throwing the first potion, which immediately caused a massive explosion, Eird estimated that the blast would remove at least 80% of a target's health. Because of its destructive power, he decided to reserve it only for emergencies against extremely powerful monsters, and named it the Infernal Mine Oil Potion. Finally, he tested the last potion. This one created a simple explosion, which delighted Eird because it was exactly what he had been trying to create. The following day, Eird encountered several bears. After making a few improvements to the potion, he threw it toward them. A large smoke screen instantly appeared, allowing him to defeat the bears with ease. Thanks to this, Eird reached level 50. Upon leveling up, he discovered that he could now enhance his wind bow weapon. By using magic, he could create an elemental weapon that would greatly increase the magical power of his equipment. Eird immediately accepted because he knew it would provide a huge advantage. Soon afterward, he traveled to another area and activated a new skill called Gatling Arrow. His firing speed increased dramatically, and he also discovered that he had gained another skill that allowed him to move through the air. This made him extremely happy because he knew many things would now become much easier. After a long while, Eird visited Mew and handed over several materials so she could create a durable cloak for him. At that moment, Eird and Mew were interrupted by an announcement from the developers regarding the latest tournament update. The developers revealed the rankings of the players with the highest PvP points. Eird's friends soon arrived and mentioned that their clan had not even bothered to participate. However, Eird noticed that both Glad and Silver had qualified, and both of them had extremely high win rates. As a result, he became eager to see the match between them. After several days of waiting, the tournament finally began. Eird and his friends arrived to watch the matches. Using his vision skill, Eird was pleased to discover that he was not the only player who possessed the Fairy Charmer title. The tournament progressed through several battles until the finalists were revealed to be Glad and Silver. Confident in his strength, Glad told the old man that it would be better for him to surrender because he was about to receive a beating. The match then began, and both fighters immediately demonstrated the skills of top-tier players. At one point, Silver launched an attack. but he fell into Glad's trap. Glad used a double slash and defeated him while he was still in the air. Yrd realized that Glad had come fully determined to win because he clearly wanted revenge against Silver. At that moment, everyone watched as Glad's fairy evolved into a beautiful young woman. She immediately announced that she no longer wished to remain with him. She explained that the purpose of the event was to choose the leader of all fairies. According to an oracle, that leader would be someone strong with natural talent, and she believed that person was someone else. The fairy, whom we will call Fae, explained that fairies were never warriors by nature. They had simply adapted to the abilities of humans. Glad considered this absurd and believed that the fairies had merely been using humans all along. Faye then informed him that their contract was officially over because all he ever talked about was getting revenge on Silver. At that moment, Glad finally realized that she had never truly considered him a real companion. However, Faye pointed out that just like her, Glad had always viewed her as nothing more than a tool for combat. After understanding this, Glad realized that Faye had used him as a stepping stone to become the Fairy Queen. Yrd and Millie found the situation strange because the Fairy Queen behaved like a real person despite being part of a video game. Yrd even wondered whether she was some kind of advanced artificial intelligence created by the developer. Finally, Faye informed Glad that as compensation he would receive 300,000 glow. She also guaranteed that he would be able to form a contract with another fairy just as powerful as she had been before becoming the Fairy Queen. Glad became furious and declared that he would never allow that to happen. In response, Faye proposed a wager involving both the prize money and the contract for the second fairy. If Glad lost, he would receive nothing. If he won, Faye would continue serving as his personal fairy. Without hesitation, Glad accepted because he believed he could defeat her. The two entered the combat arena and exchanged a series of powerful magical attacks. Despite his efforts, Glad was severely injured. When he was left with only 1 HP remaining, Faye informed Silver that she had done enough damage to Glad's pride. Silver then stepped forward and offered words of reconciliation. Faye also announced to everyone that there were still 3 additional rewards left to distribute. At that moment, Yrd and 2 other players who possessed the Fairy Charmer title were teleported into the center of the arena. Faye thanked Yrd for never entering battles against other players. The other 2 Fairy Charmers immediately received fairies as rewards. However, Yrd received something completely different. Faye informed him that he would have to fight her. The announcement left Yrd completely confused. Faye explained that she understood how disappointed he must have felt after failing to form a contract with a fairy. Because of that, she promised that if he managed to defeat her in battle, he would obtain a portion of her power along with a very valuable reward. Yrd eventually accepted the challenge. At that moment, several men were shown watching the event, and they appeared to be the developers of the game. Meanwhile, Yrd began thinking about what strategies he could use against Faye. He knew that she was extremely powerful when it came to magic. His only advantage was that he had already witnessed her battle against Glad. Because of that, he decided that the best approach would be to rely on a few unexpected tricks that she would never see coming. Both combatants prepared themselves, and the battle immediately began. Yrd managed to land a hit with an arrow despite Faye's magical defenses. This made Faye nervous because she realized that Yrd might eventually find a way to counter her magic completely. Faye charged toward him, but Yrd used a series of movements and different combat stances to neutralize her attacks. He then unexpectedly created a concrete wall that completely surrounded her. Everyone became nervous because they believed Yrd had trapped himself in a situation where he could no longer attack. However, Yrd suddenly vanished. Using his stealth skill, he completely concealed his presence. Even while protected inside the stone enclosure, Faye was unable to detect him at all. Eventually, she lowered her guard and deactivated her stone barrier. The moment she did, Yrd bound her with his whip and followed up with a 3-hit combo using different bow technique. The combination was enough to defeat Faye, making Yrd the winner of the battle. However, Yrd was disappointed because he had forgotten that everyone was watching him. The last thing he wanted was to attract attention. At that moment, the Fairy Queen reappeared and apologized for being so arrogant toward him. She then asked for the ring he had found in the dungeon and his crystal. She explained that the ring had once belonged to the Fairy King. The Fairy Queen cast a spell and fused the crystal with the ring. She then tried to force Yrd to put it on. Yrd resisted, but she even used an enhancement spell to make sure he wore it. After putting it on, Yrd checked his stats and was shocked to discover that he now possessed the power of 6 elemental fairies. Despite how powerful the ring was, Yrd felt unhappy because he could not remove it under any circumstances. Shortly afterward, Faye said goodbye to everyone in the combat arena. Eard later explained that after his battle, many players chose the archer profession because they had seen how useful it could be. This made him extremely famous, forcing him to distance himself from others in order to live a peaceful life inside the game. Unfortunately, his peaceful life did not last long. The Fairy Queen suddenly emerged from his ring. Eard immediately hit her, pointing out that for a queen, she certainly was not busy ruling anything. Faye simply replied that she had been bored and wanted to spend some time outside with him. In the next scene, Eard began gaining popularity as the queen's husband. While walking through the city, he remembered that Faye had shown him a new ability called Prince Nova. However, she had not explained how it worked because she wanted him to figure it out himself. To test it, Eard approached a bear. After trapping it with his whip, he activated the ring's ability. After reciting a long incantation, a powerful magical sphere appeared in the sky and struck the monster, completely petrifying it. The next time Eard met with Faye, he explained that he now understood Prince Nova. The skill seemed capable of creating a random effect within an area. Faye agreed and even mentioned that the petrification effect was extremely unusual. A moment later, Faye tried to take one of Eard's dishes. Eard immediately scolded her because the food was intended for customers. Faye complained that she was tired of the food in the fairy kingdom because everything there was excessively sweet. At that moment, a man arrived who had been trying to get Eard to join his guild. However, Eard showed very little interest. While the man continued talking, Eard and Faye packed up their belongings and simply left, leaving him standing there alone. Sometime later, Eard and Faye were at a trading stall. Since several customers never came to collect their orders, Eard gave many of the items to Faye for free. This made her so happy that she returned to the fairy kingdom in a great mood. The following day, Eard visited the craftsman's workshop. There he met Black and several other craftsmen who were interested in watching him create his next weapon. Eard immediately got to work and successfully upgraded his X-shaped bow. He also decided to improve his boots because he knew they could become extremely useful in battle. After several hours of work, he enhanced his footwear with steel fangs. All the craftsmen were amazed by the result. Meanwhile, Eard wished he had attracted less attention. Finally, he realized that only one last piece of equipment was missing. He then visited Mew, who handed over the cloak she had made for him. Eard was delighted because the cloak was extremely durable and would help him greatly in combat. At that moment, he received a message from the Apollo Bow Guild inviting him to meet with them. After a long trip, Eard arrived at their headquarters, where many members were gathered. There he met a woman named Ayame. Eard asked why she had summoned him. Ayame explained that she wanted to apologize for the behavior of one of her members, Nasir, who had been constantly bothering Eard. She also explained that after Eard's famous battle, he had become extremely popular. Because of that, the guild had been created exclusively for archers. This was the reason Nasir had been trying so hard to recruit Eard, believing the guild would grow even more if he joined. Eard replied that he did not have a problem with it because Nasir's actions had not really affected. However, Ayame explained that the situation was actually serious because Nasir had been recruiting new members by using Eard's name without permission. Hearing this, all the guild members bowed as an apology for everything Nasir had done. Even so, Eard accepted their apology without any issue. Ayame then informed him that Nasir had already been punished. He had been demoted from lieutenant to an ordinary guild member and had lost many of his guild privileges. After a long conversation, Ayame told Eard that he had become the hope of all archers in the game. Eard thought that all he wanted was to play the game peacefully, yet he had become extremely popular without even trying. In the next scene, the game developers discussed the situation and concluded that they would need to keep a close eye on Eard. After all, he had defeated a major opponent and had been influencing many other players. As the days passed, Eard learned that the developers had released another update which would bring a huge number of new players into the game. They had also increased the production of virtual reality headsets, eliminating the previous shortage. Soon afterward, Eard logged into the game and met up with his friends. They talked about the latest update and some of the new status effects that had been added, including Armbreaker, a skill capable of disarming opponents. Their conversation was interrupted when the system announced a new dungeon introduced through the update. The dungeon was known as the Challenge of the Deceased. The system explained that the dungeon appeared randomly and offered a completely different experience from ordinary dungeon. It also warned players that countless deadly traps were hidden inside and could easily cost them their lives. Eard and his group became excited because it sounded like an incredible adventure. Shortly afterward, the system displayed battle footage of various players. As a result, Eard's previous fights were shown to thousands of players throughout the game. This made him nervous because it only increased his popularity even further. Over the next several days, Eard defeated numerous monsters in preparation for the new dungeon. He also modified a hand shield by attaching a special arrow launcher to it, allowing him to fire arrows even when he could not use his bow directly. Sometime later, Eard visited Black and showed him the design of a new bow he planned to create. The design was based on blueprints from the real world. Black was amazed because the bow had a rating of 3 and would likely become highly desirable among archers in that world. Eard explained that he intended to build it, although for the moment there was still nothing better than the designs available in the real world. He then spent the rest of the night crafting an extremely lightweight metal shield. The shield would allow him to maintain excellent mobility while defending him. In addition, it contained a hidden bow mechanism that would let him shoot while blocking attacks. Eard tested the new equipment, and although it took some time to adapt to it, the results were a complete success. After firing it at a tree, he realized just how powerful its impact was. Several days later, the day of the dungeon update finally arrived. Eard traveled to the location and discovered that the dungeon was a massive pyramid. He was pleased to see many merchants gathered outside. However, he was suddenly approached by a group of very strange individuals. They looked exactly like Power Ranger. Each member introduced himself using the color he wore as his name. Eard immediately thought they were quite unusual. The group asked about Black Ranger, but Red explained that he could not attend because he had a stomachache. Since they were missing a member, they invited Eard to join their team. Although Eard thought it might be foolish to go with them, he ultimately accepted. After entering the dungeon, Red became impatient and wanted to rush forward. Eard immediately stopped him and explained that the area was filled with traps. He guided the group through the first room, and afterward Red announced that he would take over as the guide. Soon, several skeletons appeared. The Ranger team defeated them with ease, making Eard realize that they were actually quite capable. When they reached the stairs leading to the second floor, Eard noted that despite the dungeon allowing only 1 hour of exploration, they had already cleared the first level in just 18 minutes. Because of that, they would need to be more careful moving forward. A little later, they encountered more skeletons and wandering spirits. Pink managed to defeat several of them, but the enemies were much stronger than before. As a result, Eard had to step in and use one of his special arrows. After a long battle, the group eventually reached the stairs leading to the 4th floor. Eard pointed out that they had already spent 40 minutes in the dungeon and were only now about to enter the 4th level. Since the best reward was located somewhere within that floor, they doubted they would be able to reach it during this run. Still, they planned to do everything possible to make it to the 5th floor. The group descended further, and Eard immediately sensed a very strange aura in the area. Soon, they heard adventurers screaming and rushed toward the sound. They entered a room and suddenly became trapped inside due to a hidden mechanism. Inside were 2 adventurers who had been completely surrounded by monsters. After examining the room, Eard determined that there were no traps present and that all they needed to do was defeat the monster. In the blink of an eye, the group eliminated every enemy, causing the doors to open. A reward chest also appeared. One of the adventurers they had rescued began arguing with Eard. Eard had already detected a trap connected to the chest and warned everyone not to open it. However, the adventurer refused to listen. Realizing what was about to happen, Eard and the others immediately left the room. Moments later, they heard the chest activate and kill the adventurer who had ignored the warning. Eard explained that the room had actually been a double trap. First, it trapped adventurers with a large number of monsters. Then, if they opened the treasure chest afterward, the chest would kill them. At that moment, a flash of light appeared around the group, and they were teleported out of the dungeon because the 1-hour time limit had expired. Afterward, Red asked Eard how he had managed to identify the trap on the chest while the other adventurer had failed. After all, that adventurer also possessed the thief skill just like Eard. Red directly asked whether Eard's thief skill was level 20 or higher. Without revealing the exact level, Eard confirmed that it was. He then thought that if his skill level had been lower, he probably would have fallen for the trap as well. After a long discussion, Green mentioned that he had drawn a map of the 1st floor and suggested returning the next day. However, the others laughed because the dungeon was randomly generated, meaning the rooms would most likely be completely different the next time. After saying goodbye, Eard and his group returned to the workshop. While there, Eard decided to create a new tool that could help him inside the dungeon. As expected, Black was surprised once again because every invention Eard created was completely original. Since Eard could not manufacture the lockpick he wanted by himself, Black stepped in to help. Together, they created exactly what Eard had envisioned, leaving him completely fascinated by the result. Later, when Eard returned home, He was startled when Faye suddenly appeared right in front of him. Eard asked why she was dressed so elegantly. Faye explained that she had been delivering packed crystals to the new players. After a short conversation, Faye prepared to leave, but before doing so, she tried to give Eard a kiss. Eard immediately smacked her with his paper fan. Since Faye was acting like a complete pervert, Eard reminded her that they were not married and should not be doing things like that. Afterward, they quickly said goodbye and went their separate ways. The following day, Eard was busy crafting arrows when Faye arrived looking completely exhausted. She explained that she had successfully delivered all the crystals, but the players she met had asked countless questions. The experience had left her mentally drained because many of the players were devoted otaku who loved video game waifus. Because of this, Faye asked Eard to sign marriage papers so she could be pampered and receive plenty of head pats. The request made Eard extremely nervous because he had no intention of marrying someone like her. To calm her down, Eard decided to make some mochi. Faye loved the treat so much that she ended up resting comfortably on Eard's lap. Several days later, Eard found himself in serious trouble as a powerful boss was on the verge of killing him. The story then shifted several days into the past. Eard explained that he had spent many days practicing with trapped treasure chests using his new tool. He failed many times before finally succeeding. Eventually, his thief skill reached level 50. As a reward, he unlocked a new ability that allowed him to steal items from monsters without being detected. At that exact moment, Red contacted him and finally introduced him to Black Ranger. The group immediately headed toward the dungeon. Both Black Ranger and Eard were incredibly excited because they wanted to figure out the mechanism behind a trapped treasure chest. Over the following days, Eard continued exploring the dungeon alone. Opening chests became easier and easier for him. In addition, his new skill allowed him to move unnoticed among monsters. Eventually, the day came when he finally reached the stairs leading to the second-to-last floor. Since he only had 5 minutes remaining, he rushed downward as quickly as possible. Upon arriving, he discovered that the floor was filled with numerous liches. The rangers had previously warned him to be extremely careful because if even one lich spotted him, it would attract many more monsters. Eard immediately began running while avoiding every monster and obstacle in his path. Eventually, he reached the stairs leading to the final floor. However, the entire area was covered with traps. Using wind magic, Eard launched himself into the air with a massive leap. He triggered one of the traps, but his movement was even faster. With only 0.02 of a second remaining, he successfully entered the next floor. To his surprise, the timer suddenly stopped. The dungeon did not eject him from the area. Because of this, Eard assumed that the final boss must be hidden in the deepest section of the dungeon. As he continued descending, he heard the voice of a knight named Andre. He had been sent to the dungeon in order to seal the labyrinth. Unfortunately, all of his companions had died. When he finally reached the last chamber, there had been absolutely nothing there. Eventually, he died from lack of air and became a skeleton knight destined to guard the dungeon forever. After hearing the story, Eard asked what Andre wanted from him. Andre replied that he wanted Eard to end his suffering because he had already reached his limit. The moment he finished speaking, the stairs disappeared. Eard suddenly fell into the deepest part of the dungeon. Andre's body appeared directly before him. However, because Andre's spirit was too exhausted, another wandering soul took control of the body. Tired of all the talking, Eard immediately fired several arrows. The skeleton knight blocked every shot and launched a counterattack of his own. Eard realized that the skeleton knight was incredibly fast and extremely powerful. At that moment, the skeleton launched another attack. Eard distracted it with a fire potion and quickly charged his bow, attempting to land a powerful shot. However, the skeleton unleashed a long-range attack that knocked the bow right out of Eard's hands. With no other option, Eard switched to the crossbow mechanism attached to his hand shield and tried attacking the monster. Unfortunately, the skeleton knight dodged every single shot. It then unleashed a powerful attack that sent Eard crashing into a wall. This was the exact moment shown earlier when Eard had been stunned in front of the dungeon's final boss. Eard became extremally nervous. The skeleton knight declared that he would send Eard to the god that he and his companions had worshipped. The monster then charged forward to finish him. In response, Eard dodged the attack and delivered a kick straight to its face. The blow angered the skeleton, but Eard skillfully wrapped it with his whip and restrained it. Taking advantage of the brief opening, Eard began charging the special ring ability that Faye had given him. He started reciting the Prince Nova spell while enduring damage from the boss. After completing the chant, he successfully activated the ability. A summoning circle appeared above both of them. Soon afterward, the sphere of power descended from the sky. Eard desperately hoped that the random effect would be either petrification or a stun effect. Instead, it only froze one of the skeleton's hands. At that moment, Faye suddenly appeared to help him. Pointing her staff at the monster, she completely froze the skeleton. It was then that Eard realized the ring was actually a fairy contract connected to Faye. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he rushed to retrieve his bow. Without hesitation, Eard unleashed a combination of arrow techniques along with several explosive potions. The attack finally stripped away the skeleton's form and restored the appearance of the knight Andre once was. Andre congratulated Eard for defeating him. He believed that Eard had managed to destroy the evil spirit controlling the skeleton knight before Andre's own soul disappeared completely. As a result, he still had enough time left to say goodbye. Andre thanked Eard for freeing him from the nightmare he had endured for so many years. Jokingly, Andre admitted that there had been a moment when he thought Eard might not be able to defeat him. Eard apologized but added that he was glad he had been able to fulfill Andre's wish. Soon afterward, Andre's body began to fade away. Before disappearing, Andre told Eard that he could keep his sword as a reward. Eard then obtained the ancient knight sword. Andre mentioned that he could probably sell it for a very high price. Before leaving, Eard asked one final question about whether gods truly existed in that world. At that moment, the spirits of Andre's former companions appeared. They had seemingly come to guide him to heaven. After exchanging their final farewells, all of them slowly ascended into the sky together. The doors of the dungeon then opened, and a system announcement informed all players that one of the dungeon's secret bosses had been defeated. Because Eard had obtained the sword, a new weapon category called the Knight Sword was officially unlocked. The system further announced that there was currently no better sword anywhere in the game. Eard was thrilled to hear this. Since the system had hinted that there were many other secret bosses, he concluded that there were probably many other secret weapons as well. Because of that, he decided that he would continue exploring new dungeons whenever they appeared. The following day, Eard felt disappointed because both his shield and whip had been heavily damaged during the battle against the boss. Even so, he gratefully reflected on how useful they had been throughout the fight. He melted down the damaged metal and turned it into a new shield. Although it was slightly weaker than the previous one, it was still usable. His bow had also suffered significant damage during the battle. Eard estimated that repairing all of his equipment would cost a fortune. However, after looking at the ancient knight sword, he realized that he could either sell it for a large amount of money or use it in combat himself. Later that night, a cheerful girl became excited because it was finally her turn to go and meet Eard. Meanwhile, in another scene, the game developers discussed Faye. They explained that they had detected several minor issues with her. One of the biggest problems was that she became bored very easily, something they needed to address as soon as possible. Back with Eard, he met up with his group as they prepared to enter another dungeon. His friends informed him that a new member had joined the team. However, they apologized in advance because the girl could sometimes be rather rude. At that moment, the group was interrupted when the new member arrived. Her name was Elizabeth, although we will simply call her Elisa. At first, Elisa came across as somewhat arrogant, but Sway explained that she was still a highly skilled mage who would be a great help in battle. Sway asked her to apologize to Eard for her attitude, but she skeptically replied that an archer like him could not possibly be that useful to the group. Remaining humble, Eard simply told her that she would soon find out for herself whether he was useful or not. Afterward, the group entered the dungeon. As Eard disabled several traps, Elisa began to realize that he was not as incompetent as she had originally believed. Soon, they reached the 5th floor. The group discussed the dangers of the area, explaining that numerous lesser liches could appear at any moment. Elisa could not believe they were truly that dangerous, because she was still overly confident. Millie assured everyone that there would be no problem because she could handle paralysis effects, while Elisa was capable of curing petrification. However, at that moment, Eard sensed monsters approaching. He immediately warned the group. Everyone became nervous, but they understood that they needed to stay calm if they wanted to survive. It quickly became obvious that Elisa was terrified. She began trembling with fear. The others helped her regain her composure by reminding her that she was responsible for supporting the team with buffs. Moments later, the lesser liches appeared, and the battle began. Ray used taunt to draw the monster's attention. He successfully defeated one of them, but the remaining 3 managed to petrify part of his arm. Everyone immediately asked Elisa to cure the tank's petrification. Unfortunately, she was so frightened that she could not even speak. With no other choice, Eard ordered everyone to take cover because he was about to use explosive. After doing so, he encouraged Elisa and helped restore her confidence. The reassurance worked. Elisa successfully cast her spell, and once Ray recovered, the group managed to eliminate all the remaining monsters. After the battle, Elisa apologized to Eard for treating him poorly at the beginning. She admitted that thanks to him, she had overcome her fear. She also promised that she would continue helping the group for the rest of the dungeon without being afraid. Several hours later, the group left the dungeon in high spirits, after obtaining an impressive amount of loot. Eard then said goodbye to everyone. Unbeknownst to him, a mysterious girl had been secretly watching him. The following day, while Eard was finishing some work, the girl who had been spying on him finally approached. Her name was Ryu. Eard immediately realized that she was not a player because she had dragon-like ears and a completely different appearance. To help him understand who she was, Ryu explained that she was something similar to Faye's younger sister. The moment Eard heard that, he realized she would probably bring him just as much trouble as Faye did. When Eard asked why she had come, he was completely shocked by her answer. Ryu declared that she had personally come to test Eard's delicious lips. Naturally, Eard slapped her for being just as perverted as her sister. Ryu quickly admitted that she was joking. She explained that she had actually come because she wanted to taste his cooking after hearing Faye praise him as an incredible chef. Eard agreed to prepare some food for her, but explained that she would have to wait because he still had several tasks to finish. Ryu happily replied that she would accompany him while exploring the city. Instead, Eard handed over some materials, and Mew explained that she could create a new set of silver-reinforced leather equipment. Eard accepted the offer and said he would return in a few days when it was finished. At that moment, Ryu interrupted and announced that it was already time to eat. Eard then prepared a boiled rabbit steak with herbs. The moment Ryu tasted it, she was completely amazed by how juicy and flavorful the meat was. She continued eating non-stop. In the end, Eard prepared at least 3 different dishes for her. After she was finally satisfied, Eard asked whether she was a fairy like Faye. However, Ryu refused to answer because she was not allowed to reveal that information. Their conversation was interrupted when an important announcement appeared for all players. A short while later, Eard met with Black, and the two discussed the announcement. The update revealed that player techniques could evolve into arts if they reached a high enough level. However, there was a major condition attached to this system. Players would have to specialize in only one playstyle. For example, mages would need to focus entirely on magical attacks, while swordsmen would need to focus solely on sword techniques. Black pointed out that many players would be unhappy with the announcement because they only had 1 month to adjust their builds. He also warned Eard that the update could become a serious problem for him. After all, Eard had already mastered numerous skills from different categories. If he chose to specialize entirely in combat, he would lose the ability to continue cooking at the same level. That would mean his friends would no longer be able to enjoy the delicious feasts he always prepared for them. Eard told Black that he would think about the specialization update later and continue playing normally for the time being. Several days later, Eard visited Mew and was delighted to see his new armor set. The materials he had provided were of extremely high quality, and the finished equipment greatly increased both his stats and defenses. Eard told Mew that she could keep his old equipment because he would now be focusing on taking care of the new set. He also explained that in this game world, players often become emotionally attached to their weapons and equipment. Because of that, he found it difficult to abandon old gear just to use something new. A while later, Eard was walking the city when Faye arrived accompanied by several fairies. She created a barrier so nobody could overhear their conversation. With a sad expression, Faye informed Eard that no fairy would be allowed to form a contract with him. At first, Eard thought the fairies hated him that much. However, Faye explained that the opposite was true. Every fairy in the kingdom adored him. She revealed that she had originally planned to introduce him to one of the 6 powerful fairies standing behind her. Those 6 were among the strongest fairies in existence. Unfortunately, once the rest of the fairy kingdom learned about it, countless fairies rushed to Faye and begged to be the one chosen to form a contract with Eard. According to Faye, if even one fairy successfully formed a contract with him, the entire fairy kingdom would likely descend into chaos. Because of that, she apologized for not allowing him to have a fairy companion. Eard remained calm and simply replied that he was already used to being alone, so it would not be a problem. Faye was relieved to hear that. As compensation, she decided to grant him a portion of her power. Taking his hand, she gave him 2 extremely powerful techniques. The first ability was called 7 Shooting Stars. It would activate whenever Eard landed 7 hits on the same target, causing massive damage to the enemy. The second ability was called Sacrifice Bow. This technique could be activated at the cost of 90% of Eard's HP. In exchange, his bow would be destroyed and a tremendously powerful arrow would be fired. Faye warned him that the technique was extremely dangerous and advised him to avoid using it whenever possible. Although Yrd acknowledged how powerful the ability was, he had no desire to keep destroying his bows. Because of that, he decided he would only use expendable weapons if he ever activated the skill. Before leaving, Faye told him to keep everything they discussed a secret. Yrd agreed. Faye also revealed that the next major update would open the Fairy Kingdom to all adventurers. The news excited Yrd greatly, and he immediately decided that he would visit once the update was released. Before the fairies departed, Yrd prepared a large banquet for them to take back to their kingdom. The following day, Yrd and his group discussed a new advertisement related to the game. The company behind the game had partnered with another corporation and released several new virtual reality titles. Even so, Yrd stated that he preferred staying with this game because the Fairy Kingdom update would be arriving very soon. At that moment, Sway attempted to steal a piece of Yrd's meat. He immediately received a smack from Yrd's paper fan. Yrd then returned the fan to Nora and asked her to hit Sway whenever he did something stupid. Taking advantage of the moment, Sway asked for the third time whether Yrd wanted to officially join their clan. Although Yrd regularly joined them on adventures, he still preferred a peaceful lifestyle and politely declined. Just then, Ryu arrived and tried to steal some of Yrd's meat. She grabbed the fan from Nora and smacked Sway herself. Ryu became disappointed because Yrd's food smelled incredibly delicious. The others immediately asked who she was. Ray, being his usual perverted self, joked that apparently controlling the Fairy Queen was not enough for Yrd. The comment earned Ray a direct hit from Yrd for imagining something so ridiculous. Yrd even joked that if he had the chance to get rid of the Fairy Queen, he would not hesitate because she ate so much food that she was practically bankrupting him. Afterward, Yrd spent some time talking with Ryu. Meanwhile, the girls gathered together and noticed how close the two seemed. Sway then threatened to spread rumors about them. In response, Yrd threatened to never cook for him again. The girls continued teasing Yrd, saying that he had gone from being a fairy charmer to a dragon charmer. Several days later, the Fairy Kingdom update finally became available. Countless players began traveling toward the Fairy Kingdom, and Yrd was just as excited as everyone else. However, when he arrived at the kingdom's gates, a guard requested to see his ring. After examining it, the guard immediately confirmed that he was Yrd. The guard then explained that the Fairy Queen had ordered Yrd to be brought to her immediately. This made Yrd extremely nervous because it was drawing even more attention. Soon afterward, a giant bird known as Pikachu arrived. The guard explained that only certain fairies were allowed to ride it. To avoid attracting attention, he ordered Pikachu to carry Yrd directly to the Fairy Queen. Unfortunately, the entire situation attracted far more attention than anyone expected. Yrd climbed onto Pikachu and was pleasantly surprised by how soft it felt. The giant bird then began flying toward the Fairy Queen's castle. After several minutes of flight, Yrd arrived at the castle. He was welcomed by Faye and the most powerful fairies in the kingdom. Faye informed him that they had organized a special parade and that he would be the star of the event. The announcement left Yrd less than thrilled. That night, however, all the fairies were delighted to finally meet Yrd in person. As he rode through the parade on top of Pikachu, Yrd reflected that he truly disliked being the center of attention. Unfortunately, he also knew that refusing the invitation was not really an option. Despite all of Faye's charms, Yrd thought that even though this was only a video game, the memories he was creating in this fantasy world would stay with him forever. The following day, Yrd found himself kneeling before the Fairy Queen's throne. He thanked her for the warm welcome. Faye explained that she had needed to introduce him to all of the fairies because they believed she wanted to keep Yrd all to herself. She then approached him and sarcastically remarked that perhaps he really should belong only to her. Another fairy immediately told her to behave because she was acting a little too perverted. The fairies then asked Yrd to stay with them in the Fairy Kingdom. In exchange, they promised not to bother him or assign guards to watch over him. Yrd thanked them and mentioned that starting the next day he planned to return to being an ordinary adventurer. A while later, Yrd was walking through the castle halls when Faye stopped him to talk. She boldly suggested that they could sleep together in the same bed. Yrd immediately became nervous. After thinking about it for a few seconds, he reacted like a complete coward and ran out of the castle. Later, Yrd explained that after leaving the castle, Pikachu carried him to the southern village of the Fairy King. There, Yrd began completing quests from the local tavern. When he reported that the tasks had been fairly easy, the tavern owner replied that she had expected them to keep him busy for several days. Yrd then asked whether he could use the tavern's kitchen. She agreed without hesitation. Over the following days, Yrd prepared numerous dishes. His cooking quickly attracted the attention of adventurers throughout the village. He eventually asked them whether they would be willing to pay for his meals. Everyone immediately agreed. As a result, Eard spent the next several days cooking for all the adventurers in the area. His seasoning and cooking skills impressed everyone who tasted his food. Eard later explained that during those days, he focused on hunting. He used the meat from his prey to cook meals at the tavern and sell food. More importantly, he enjoyed spending time with the adventurers who gathered there. He never expected that his stay in the fairy kingdom would turn out this way. One day, however, a woman rushed into the tavern and begged him to hide. She explained that the daughter of the fortress chief was on her way and was specifically looking for him. Soon afterward, a beast woman arrived. Acting extremely arrogant, she declared that she was searching for Eard because she intended to give him the opportunity to cook for her. The tavern owner immediately claimed that Eard had already left. She told the beast woman that he had traveled north. After thinking for a few moments, the beast woman ordered her guards to capture Eard if they found him. She also warned the tavern owner that she would pay dearly if she was lying. After issuing the threat, she finally left. Everyone in the tavern agreed that the beast woman was incredibly annoying and were relieved to see her gone. They then apologized to Eard because the fairy queen had specifically ordered that nobody should trouble him. The tavern owner explained that the beast woman did whatever she wanted because her father was the chief of the fortress. Despite numerous complaints from both citizens and adventurers, she was never punished. Eard realized that the true problem was the girl's father. To avoid causing trouble for everyone, he decided that it would be best for him. The tavern owner sadly admitted that she would have liked him to stay longer. However, she understood that the orders not to bother Eard were very clear. Eard thanked her for allowing him to stay there for several days. That night, he secretly left the village. Before departing, the guards informed him that they were gathering evidence to present to the fairy queen. They hoped he would return once the situation had settled down. After leaving the area, a bear named Satan offered to escort him to the next southern city. Meanwhile, several fairies were speaking with Faye. They informed her that the daughter of the fortress chief had been harassing a human. Faye immediately became concerned because the fairies were trying to build positive relationships with humans. However, when she learned that the human in question was Eard, her expression became far more intimidating. Back with Eard, he and Satan eventually arrived at a southern city within the fairy kingdom. Eard was amazed to discover that music could be heard everywhere. Satan explained that the fairy kingdom was home to many craftsmen, and that artistic expression was highly encouraged. He further explained that different forms of art were practiced throughout every part of the city. Afterward, the two headed toward an inn because Eard was extremely tired. Once all the necessary paperwork had been completed, Eard lay down on the bed and logged out of the game. The following day, Eard woke up in his bed and felt something lying on top of him. When he lifted the blanket, he discovered that it was Faye, who was wearing a very mischievous expression. Faye immediately began begging Eard to let her stay in bed with him. At that exact moment, the owner of the inn walked in and found them in a very compromising position. As if things were not already bad enough, Satan also arrived. Both of them were completely shocked when they realized that the woman lying on top of Eard was none other than the fairy queen herself. The situation became even worse when Rhea arrived. She immediately became extremely jealous after seeing how close they looked and imagined that something much more intimate had happened between them. Faye quickly explained that she had only come to apologize for the misunderstanding involving the daughter of the fortress chief. She informed them that she had punished both the girl and all 80 of her private guards. When Eard asked how she had done it, Faye casually replied that she had repeatedly beaten them to the brink of death and then healed them afterward. The answer left everyone completely disturbed because it proved just how crazy she really was. Eard assured her that he held no grudge against the fairy kingdom. Faye was delighted to hear that. However, Ryu immediately her sister for acting far too flirtatious around Eard. Ryu was clearly jealous and did not want Faye taking advantage of Eard's innocence. Afterward, the two sisters said goodbye and left. The elderly innkeeper then explained that fairies and dragons had been involved in conflicts long ago. Because of that, if people discovered Ryu's true identity, it could create serious problems. The old man left shortly afterward. Seton jokingly commented that he would not mind having a crazy girl like Faye in his life. At that moment, a woman arrived looking for Seton. She explained that her daughter had disappeared and asked for help finding her. The group sat down and discussed the situation. Satan noticed that the woman carried the surname of a noble family. She explained that her daughter normally went for walks every day but had failed to return this time. After handing them a picture of the girl, Eard and Satan agreed to search for her. The two then traveled to several locations asking people for information. Eventually, some guards mentioned that the girl had headed into the forest. After entering the forest, Eard detected the presence of several monsters. Moments later, a group of goblins appeared. As expected, Eard and Satan defeated them without much difficulty. Eard then activated his tracking magic. The skill detected numerous monsters as well as traces left behind by people. Without hesitation, they followed the trail. When they finally arrived, Eard used his vision skill and discovered that the missing girl was surrounded by goblins. He instructed Satan to spray a potion and protect the girl while he provided support from a distance. After reaching her and giving her the potion, Satan and the girl began fighting together. A short while later, Eard joined them after the goblins had already been defeated. The girl thanked them for saving her. Eard explained that her mother had hired them to find her. He then asked why she had not transformed into a wolf, considering that her family descended from the Fenris bloodline. The girl explained that she had been walking through the forest when she suddenly smelled something sweet. The next thing she knew, she was surrounded by monsters. Eard immediately gave her an antidote. After taking it, he asked her to try transforming again. This time, she succeeded. Eard concluded that someone had poisoned her. He then instructed her to return to her human form. Satan immediately escorted her away because Eard wanted a moment alone. Once they were gone, Eard threw a fire potion into a nearby bush. Earlier, he had detected the presence of two humans hiding there. A man emerged from the flames. Eard informed him that actions like these were usually carried out by bandits. At the same time, Eard sensed something unusual about him. The man seemed like a human controlling a character, yet Eard knew he was not a real player. Eard concluded that he needed to eliminate him immediately. He suspected that the individual had been created by the developers and could potentially trigger a war between dragons and fairies. The man attacked. However, with a single move, Eard defeated him. Eard then vowed that he would do everything within his power to prevent another war between dragons and fairies. Afterward, Eard walked deeper into the forest and met up with Satan and the rescued girl. He informed them that he had dealt with the suspicious individual hiding nearby. As a loyal companion, Satan immediately offered to carry Eard on his back. Sometime later, the girl was finally reunited with her mother. The reunion was emotional because the mother had feared the worst. She offered to reward both Eard and Satan with 100,000 glow each. However, Eard surprised everyone by asking for something entirely different. Instead of money, he requested permission for Satan to spend time with her daughter. The request completely shocked Satan. Unlike him, the girl was delighted by the proposal. She admitted that she admired Satan because many stories described him as a true hero. Satan accepted the date, but he became extremely nervous. Seeing that, Eard suggested that they leave so the two of them could spend some time alone. Afterward, Eard contacted Faye. For a brief moment, Faye thought that Eard was about to confess his feelings to her, which immediately earned her a smack from Eard as usual. A little later, Eard explained what had happened with the suspicious human. He also mentioned that they needed to prevent a possible war in case the developers sent another human like that one. At that point, Eard felt tired and told Faye that he was going to rest. However, Faye immediately jumped onto the bed and asked if they could sleep together. Remaining focused, Eard told her to leave. Faye began acting like a crying child because she had wanted to sleep beside Eard for many weeks. Since she refused to leave, Eard eventually told her that perhaps they could sleep together someday. Faye instantly became happy after hearing those words and immediately left. The following day, Eard said goodbye to the old innkeeper and thanked him for the hospitality. At that moment, Satan and the young woman arrived and announced that they would be living together. The news made Eard very happy because he felt that his efforts had paid off. When Eard explained that he would be traveling to another city, Satan regretted that he would no longer be able to carry him on his back. Eard humbly thanked him and reminded him that he had already done enough by bringing him to the city in the first place. After their farewell, the old man informed Eard that the next destination he wanted to visit was extremely far away. Eard then whistled to call Pikachu. The old man laughed and remarked that even the royal family could not summon Pikachu so easily. To everyone's surprise, the giant bird immediately appeared in front of them. A short while later, Pikachu carried Eard to the outskirts of the city. Not wanting to attract attention, Eard asked the bird to land early. As a gesture of gratitude, he prepared a meal for Pikachu. In return, Pikachu gifted him one of its feathers. The feather strengthened whoever carried it and greatly reduced the fatigue of adventurers. After saying goodbye, Eard visited Black. While there, he created an improved bow using lightweight iron and then went elsewhere to test it. Soon afterward, Eard received a message from a girl thanking him for freeing the souls trapped inside the event dungeon. She introduced herself as the Guardian of the Labyrinths. The Guardian invited him to participate in a special event for players who had defeated dungeon bosses. According to her, participants could obtain unique rewards and rare items. Despite the tempting offer, Eard declined immediately because he did not want to gain even more fame. A little later, Eard heard a strange noise in the distance. When he investigated, he found several people lying on the ground and a crying baby dragon nearby. Eard carefully picked up the baby dragon. At first, he considered bringing it to the city. However, realizing how much attention that would attract, he decided against it. Instead, he gave the baby dragon some meat to calm it down. Later, while cooking, Eard reflected that all baby creatures were adorable. As he sat down to eat, he noticed that the dragon was still hungry. The baby dragon eventually ate all of Eard's food before falling asleep. Seeing this, Eard contacted Faye. The moment Faye saw the dragon, she panicked. She explained that there were different kinds of dragons, but all of them were incredibly powerful. Faye immediately became concerned because if the dragon's parents arrived in the city, they could cause major problems. At that exact moment, another fairy rushed over with urgent news. A pair of dragons was approaching at incredible speed. One of the fairies looked at the baby dragon and went into shock, believing that someone had kidnapped a dragon hatchling. Faye nervously explained that she was not responsible and suspected that bandits had been involved. Without wasting time, Eard headed toward an open field where the dragons soon arrived. He calmly explained everything that had happened. At first, the dragons did not believe him. However, once Eard returned their child, they examined the hatchling's memories and realized that he had been telling the truth. The dragons apologized for assuming that he was a kidnapper. They also thanked him for feeding and protecting their child. Eard then asked them for a favor. He requested that they forget the incident and not blame the fairy kingdom for what had happened. The dragons accepted his request and departed at incredible speed. Faye thanked Eard for considering the well-being of her kingdom and preventing a possible conflict. She even invited him back to the castle so she could properly reward him. However, Eard replied that he preferred living quietly while completing quests in small villages. At that moment, Pikacha arrived to pick him up. After saying goodbye, Eard departed once again. Sometime later, he arrived in another city and headed straight to a tavern. Unfortunately, he was disappointed to discover that there were very few quests available there. The tavern owner explained that humans had taken most of the available work, leaving very little for everyone else. As a result, she offered Eard a job at the tavern. He accepted the offer, only to discover that the workload was an absolute nightmare. In another scene, the game developers were discussing Faye and Ryu. They explained that neither of them had emotions at the beginning. However, thanks to Eard, they had gradually begun developing emotions of their own. The developers ultimately concluded that Eard was an extremely interesting player. In fact, he had become one of the reasons they wanted to continue expanding and improving the game. Back with Eard, he found himself relaxing and thinking that this was the kind of life he truly wanted. Ever since entering the game, he had constantly been dealing with trouble because he kept attracting attention. He also reflected on how many things he had accomplished that he could never have done when he was younger in the real world. After all, his real body was nowhere near as flexible as his avatar in One More Life Online. For a moment, Eard became somewhat emotional. He realized that he enjoyed being surrounded by people because it kept his mind occupied and prevented him from dwelling on unnecessary thoughts. Ultimately, Eard felt grateful for all the wonderful people he had met in this world. Several hours later, Eard met with Faye and another individual who introduced himself as one of the Green Dragon. The dragon explained that green dragons were wild dragons capable of controlling the wind. Eard asked whether green dragons normally avoided contact with humans and other races. The dragon replied that green dragons were an exception. They were able to take human form and often acted as messengers between different races. Eard then asked why he had been brought there. The green dragon explained that the matter involved the baby dragon. Although they had promised not to involve Eard any further, they had encountered a problem. Ever since returning to its homeland, the baby dragon had refused to eat properly. Young dragons needed enormous amounts of food in order to grow strong. However, the hatchling was eating only half of what it should. To make matters worse, the baby dragon constantly begged to learn how to transform into a human, something that was completely impossible. As Eard thought about the situation, he suddenly remembered feeding the dragon. This realization made him nervous. The green dragon looked confused, so Eard immediately demonstrated the reason behind the problem. He served one of his dishes to the dragon. The moment the green dragon tasted it, he was completely amazed. He instantly asked Yrd for more food. This irritated Yrd because everyone seemed to treat him as nothing more than a cook. The dragon apologized and sincerely begged Yrd to prepare something for the baby dragon. Since Yrd lacked the necessary ingredients, he immediately jumped out the window and went searching for them. Several hours later, Yrd prepared a grand feast for the baby dragon. The green dragon hurried back to his homeland with the food. Afterward, Yrd and Faye were left alone. Naturally, Faye once again invited Yrd to join her in bed. Seeing where the conversation was heading, Yrd immediately ran away. He still could not believe how shamelessly perverted she could be. Sometime later, the dragons were shocked to discover that the baby dragon would not stop eating. The hatchling devoured everything in sight. The dragon's father was amazed that a simple human had managed to influence dragonkind so greatly. As far as the dragons were concerned, Yrd's greatest achievement was clearly being an incredible chef. Several days later, the green dragon attempted to recreate Yrd's recipe. Unfortunately, every attempt ended in failure. No matter how hard he tried, the food always turned out terrible. Meanwhile, another green dragon was secretly watching him through a window. In the next scene, that dragon traveled into the forest and transformed into an old man named Emero. Around the same time, Yrd logged back into the game. To his horror, he discovered that Faye was hugging him in bed once again. As usual, Yrd responded by giving her a beating. After leaving the room, he noticed that everyone around him treated him with great respect. Soon afterward, he encountered Emero. Yrd immediately tried to pretend he was someone else. After exchanging a few words, he attempted to continue his journey. However, it was not long before both Faye and Emero appeared in front of him looking extremely annoyed. Without hesitation, Yrd used wind magic to escape. He rushed to an inn so he could log out without being bothered. The following day, Yrd apologized to the receptionist. The receptionist looked extremely nervous and informed him that the Fairy Queen had issued a warrant for his capture. This news made Yrd furious. He stormed into the castle and kicked open the door to Faye's chamber. Completely enraged, Yrd demanded that Faye remove the ring she had given him. He declared that he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. As for Emero, Yrd stated that he had no intention of granting any cooking-related favors. He did not want to become further involved with dragons. Emero then asked what Yrd would do if he refused to leave them alone. Still furious, Yrd replied that he would not hesitate to fight. Emero was pleased by that answer. He suggested settling the matter outside. Once they arrived outside, Emero transformed into his dragon form and generously allowed Yrd to attack first. Yrd launched his assault, but it had absolutely no effect. Emero immediately charged into battle. After several exchanges, he landed a direct hit on Yrd. In response, Yrd unleashed one of his strongest attacks. Even so, he could not pierce the dragon's scales. They were as hard as steel. Emero counterattacked and damaged Yrd's shield. The sight deeply upset Yrd because the shield had accompanied him through countless adventures. Despite this setback, Yrd refused to surrender. As a human, he still had his pride. At that moment, Emero began charging a powerful attack. Yrd reacted instantly. He rushed toward the dragon's head and threw several explosive potions directly into its mouth. This caused Yrd's HP to drop significantly. Seeing the dragon injured, he believed this was his chance. He decided it was the perfect moment to use the secret technique that Faye had given him. He activated 7 falling stars and struck the dragon repeatedly. But despite taking countless hits, the dragon survived. Yrd realized that it was still not enough to defeat such a monster. At that moment, Emmer charged a devastating attack that destroyed the surrounding area. He believed Yrd had been killed by the blast, but by using wind magic and stealth, Yrd managed to hide behind a large rock. Yrd understood that he only had one final trump card left. He regretted it because using this attack would cost him his bow. A powerful aura began to emanate from both Yrd and his weapon, shocking the dragon who had thought he was already dead. Yrd poured all of his willpower into a magical arrow that he created on the spot. After charging it for several seconds, he fired it. Emmer erected a wind barrier, but Yrd used all his strength and forced the attack through. Even so, Emmer was left gravely wounded. Since Yrd could no longer fight after losing his bow, he rushed in and finished the dragon off with several explosive potions. In another scene, the game developers were astonished that Yrd had defeated Emmer. One of them suggested nerfing explosive potions, but another developer disagreed, arguing that doing so would discourage players from crafting potions. They were especially bewildered by Yrd because, despite the game simulating real pain, none of it had stopped him. Back with Yrd, His soul was observing everything that had happened. He assumed he would respawn in 2 minutes at the last place where he had rested. However, the dragons arrived and used a special item to revive him immediately. Yrd could not understand why they had chosen to revive him instead of Emmer. The red dragon apologized for all the trouble and explained that Emmer was an elder among the green dragons. Over time, he had become arrogant and treated both people and other species poorly. The dragon also revealed that Emmer had threatened Faye, demanding that she capture Yrd or he would destroy cities. This made Yrd finally understand why a warrant had been placed on him. The dragons assured him that they had intended to deal with Emmer themselves, but when they arrived, they found that Yrd had already defeated him. Because of that, there would be no conflict between humans and dragons. The dragon also mentioned that they had never properly paid him for the food he had provided. As payment, they gave him a set of light dragon scale armor, 800,000 glow, and a mysterious but extremely powerful bow. Yrd immediately equipped the armor and was amazed by how light it felt compared to anything he had worn before. When he examined the bow, he found that he could not even view its statistic. The dragon explained that it had once belonged to a powerful fairy, the only one capable of standing against a great battle. After saying their final words, the dragons bid him farewell and departed. Once they were gone, Yrd collapsed from exhaustion. He called for Pikacha, who quickly arrived and carried him away. As Pikacha transported him, Yrd reflected on how much fun he had been having since entering the world of the game. Several hours later, he arrived at a shop in the Fairy Kingdom and purchased a magical cloak. Afterward, he went to see the queen because he felt he owed her an apology. Faye looked deeply saddened. Yrd remembered that some fairies had told him she had been miserable ever since he left the castle in anger. When he spoke to her, she brightened up immediately. Yrd told her that the red dragon had explained everything that had happened, and he apologized for his behavior. Faye admitted that she had also acted poorly and told him that he could ask for anything he wanted as a reward. In the end, Yrd asked her to seal his ring. He said he never should have received special privileges in the first place, and he thanked her for always treating him kindly. Faye sealed the ring's powers, and the two of them said their farewells, promising that they would meet again someday. Yrd left the castle and decided to return to Fizz, believing that many new adventures and reunions with his friends awaited him.